Right. Well, good morning, folks. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bowie, and this morning we have a great program lined up for you. Um, our webinar presenters are Mandy Marable, who is a Senior Public Service Associate and has served as part of the State 4-H faculty for 19 years. In her role as Extension Specialist, Mandy supports 4-H County Extension agents by garnering curricula and materials to reach students through 4-H programming and coordinates the framework for 4-H professional development. She is also charged with enhancing Georgia 4-H's longstanding relationship with Georgia school systems as we continue to work to be a partner in public education. Leanna Deal is the 4-H Program Development Coordinator serving 39 counties in UGA Extension's Southeast District. As a PDC, Leanna provides training, support, and coaching to the 4-H staff in the counties located in the southeastern Georgia area. Prior to serving in her current role, Leanna was a county extension 4-H agent for 15 years. Lee Colburn is a 30-year award-winning educator, community leader, and educational consultant and published author who specializes in working with schools and communities striving to promote equity by offering wraparound service opportunities for their students and families. Between 2015 and 2017, Lee founded a school and community wraparound service center in Marietta, Georgia that quickly gained state and national attention. In 2017, she began her career as a consultant and she joined community and leadership consultant Linda Beggs to launch the Synergy Project. Through their consultancy, Lee and Linda collaborate with schools and communities to gather student voice and then customize partnerships and services to the barriers and assets of each community. Tackling tough issues such as mental health, substance use, homelessness, and family changes, Mrs. Colburn and Mrs. Beggs provide a proven step-by-step process to assist schools and service agencies in establishing dynamic partnerships between their elected representatives, public service agencies, health departments, local, state service agencies, and community organizations to improve the life of their students and residents. Lee earned degrees from Kennesaw State, the University of Mississippi, and the University of Alabama. The wraparound work of Lee and the Synergy Project has been featured by Principal Leadership, Education Dive, Ed Surge, National Review, and NPR. Lee is a popular speaker at events such as the National Youth at Risk Conference, the National Elementary and Secondary Education Act Conference, the National Building Communities of Recovery Conference, and more. Her uplifting presentations provide her audience with practical, applicable, and hopeful advice. The Wraparound Guide, How to Gather Student Voice and Build Community Partnerships and Cultivate Hope, written by Lee and Linda, was published by Solution Tree in November of 2020. The content has proven so timely and the process is so actionable that the book has already entered its second printing. Please type your questions in the Q&A box as we move along, and we will answer those at the end of the session. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Mandy Marable.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bowie. It's such an honor to be part of this morning's presentation. I have the privilege of painting the picture of what is cooperative extension within the University of Georgia. And we are faculty and staff committed to improving the state, our communities through research-based programming, expertise, service to grow businesses, families, and the environment each and every day. Our mission is to extend lifelong learning to the people of Georgia through unbiased research-based education in agriculture, the environment, communities, youth, and families. Our key message is that we translate the science of everyday living for families, farmers, and communities to foster a healthy and prosperous Georgia. We work in 3 program areas, and those are agriculture and natural resources, family and consumer sciences, and 4-H youth development. And you can see our faculty numbers and catch a glimpse of a snapshot of our reach and impact across the state. Of our 3 program areas, 4-H and its program area audience, youth and their families, positions us to be a great partnership with school systems, and we are so proud of the fact that we have partnered with schools throughout our state for more than 100 years. Today, we will speak specifically about 4-H and its connections to wraparound services, keeping in mind that our family and consumer science and agriculture and natural resources partners in our extension program here in our state are a part of this total package. The 4-H program in Georgia reaches over 190,000 youth through public and private school partnerships, programming with homeschool audiences and cohorts, collaboration with our 1890 land-grant university, Fort Valley State, and all three program areas work to provide enrichment for our schools in the communities where we serve. Our 5 4-H centers range from the mountains of North Georgia to our coast and are also a partner to schools across the state. Our program with environmental education is experiential, standards-based, and brings the ecosystems to life for youth. We are known for leadership development and have a unique partnership with the Georgia Association of Elementary School Principals and the Georgia Association of Middle School Principals, bringing leadership conferences and introductions of the concepts of leadership to Georgia's youngest citizenry. While our numbers are lower this year due to the pandemic, agents and staff across the state have remained committed to reaching youth through virtual and, when possible, with safety precautions in place, small group programming. Our infographics provide you with a snapshot of our diverse reach and our enrollment by gender, ethnicity, grades, and residency. To better understand our total program, we have a few more components to highlight. Our 4-H centers that provide both environmental education, which had a reach of more than 23,000 through March of 2020, and our summer camp residential programs, which unfortunately we were not able to have summer camp last summer due to the pandemic. In addition to these two outstanding residential programs, our 4-H facilities also host a variety of conferences that include a wide range of users. This snapshot demonstrates the use of our centers through March of 2020. Volunteers are critical to our program and empower the vast reach and impact that we are able to have. As Ms. Colburn speaks about the value of mentors in her presentation this morning, volunteers are a strength for us in helping to mentor and coach youth in the areas of career readiness, content and skill development, and serve as an example of the power of a positive adult relationship in the life of a young person. In our volunteer snapshot, we also highlight the number of teams that give back to the school through in-service volunteering. This is a leadership development component and a value of service that we hope continues for the youth in our program through adulthood. Georgia is home to a large military population, both active and reserve, and we are intentional in our efforts to serve youth who are military dependents. Our programming offers youth a variety of areas of project work, leadership development, and career readiness and workforce development. We program in 3 areas: agriculture and STEM, civic engagement, and healthy living. And these are a reflection of the national priority areas for programming for our national program as well. We are grateful to have the resources, research, and relationships in both the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences and the College of Family and Consumer Sciences here at the University of Georgia, supporting our design and delivery of these programs. Positive youth development is intentional. It is the combination of positive experiences, positive relationships, and positive environments. In 4-H, we ascribe to building programming on a foundation of positive youth development. Our framework is known as the essential elements, and learners' research has demonstrated that youth who participate in a high-quality developed program have positive outcomes. The 8 elements that are considered essential are categorized into 4 key concepts of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. And as a state, we expect that each county program will focus on developing their delivery with the 8 elements and 4 categories as a priority. And in order to do that, we provide them a roadmap and a framework for building program expectations. Through in-school programming, we build a sense of belonging. Our flagship program of Project Achievement, where youth are allowed to explore a topic of interest, builds mastery. Independence is built through a week-long summer camp residential experience, and our yearly conference of high school youth, known to us as State 4-H Council, has themes of civic engagement and service, creating a pathway for learning and practicing generosity. We have many other program areas and priorities that support and sustain this framework. The real strength for Georgia 4-H is the continuity of weaving positive youth development elements and categories into 4 priority program areas. I encourage you to listen closely today to our featured speaker as she shares more about wraparound services. You might just hear some familiar things. My colleague, Leanna Deal, covers the southeast corner of our state. Her role is to support 4-H agents and staff in leading their local county programs. And today, she will speak to the role of agents and staff, how they work and connect in their communities, and why we are well positioned to partner with schools to provide wraparound services. Leanna?
Thank you, Mandy. I'm happy to be here today as we learn more about this practical approach to meeting the needs of young people in our communities. As a program development coordinator and a member of the State 4-H staff, I get a bird's eye view of the wonderful connections being made across the state by our extension professionals. Community relationships are the foundation of what we do. And in addition to being an extension of the University of Georgia locally, we're connectors in communities. We often say if Extension does not have the answer, we can usually find out who does and help connect our clients with reliable resources and information. Of course, my particular area of expertise and extension is with 4-H. And as Mandy has nicely outlined, we see that 4-H professionals are uniquely positioned to be positive youth development leaders in our communities. And that's through our strong partnerships with schools, county government, and a host of other local organizations that have a vested interest in seeing youth succeed. Our 4-H professionals are able to form lasting relationships and mentor youth because we often work with these youth long-term, from elementary school through graduation. And we do this through experiences in school, as well as opportunities beyond the classroom, as Mandy mentioned. That positive relationship with a caring adult in a safe environment is so important and is really the foundation for helping youth see themselves contributing to the well-being of their communities and beyond. The development of the whole child, regardless of their circumstance, is central to our mission in Georgia 4-H. And it aligns closely with the core principles that we're looking forward to hearing more about today from Lee, and how 4-H and Extension could be a partner and a connector with this concept of local synergy or a wraparound or hub of human services for our youth. As we learn from Lee today, we would ask you to consider, where are your schools and community on the continuum of offering wraparound services, and what role might you be suited to play in making this concept perhaps a reality locally? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lee. Lee, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Good morning from Georgia. I want to introduce for just a moment my business partner, Linda Beggs, who is also on the call. She's here for technology assistance and also redundancy of just content. I live in a very rural area of Georgia, and sometimes one of our barriers to health and learning is an inconsistency of just internet. So I'm hoping that this is going to go through great. Most of our training is usually done face-to-face. But I'm hopeful that you'll get some valuable tools and resources out of what we teach today. Our goal is to work with school improvement, but also to work with community improvement to build schools and communities of hope. We work in urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas, and even remote areas. And what I hope you'll find is that our processes, as well as the tools that we're going to provide for you today, will be applicable in your area as well. What you see here on the screen is just kind of a copy of what you see from the cover of our book, The Wraparound Guide. It's obviously not necessary for you to have one to go through the training today, but we will say that it's a very actionable book. It's very heavy on verbs, as my partner would say. And what we want you to know about that is that, if you purchase that book, all the reproducibles are downloaded, that kind of thing. But what you'll find is much of what we talk about today, you're provided the details and the logistics behind the vision in the resource of the book. Hold on one second, just trying to get my screen to advance. In this session, you're going to learn about not only the basics and the processes of what educators are talking about when they say whole child, but also about what we mean by the holistic approach of wraparound services. We hope you'll also gain some importance or insight into the importance and the establishment of wraparound partnerships, which really is the ability to collaborate with others, to seek out partners with whom you have maybe shared clientele or participants, but who have a difference in expertise or resources in the services that they provide. For those of you who do not work in an educational system, I wanted to give you just a very quick, maybe 1 minute, 30-year overview. There have been 3 different distinct waves of educational school reform, and this is how we now are able to reach out to those agencies and organizations in our community that we think could be helpful to helping students achieve not only health and wellness, but to have a high level of achievement academically and a successful college and career transition. In the beginning, we began to look only at kids really through that cognitive growth. And a lot of you may remember No Child Left Behind. And as schools were actually being measured based on test scores, teachers were being evaluated pretty much only on test scores. And what we found is that, of course, what we already knew, kids are not these little cognitive widgets. They're these whole creatures that are also have this social and emotional design to their wholeness, and that we know that that can drive their learning. So as schools began to go into wave 2, they began to do a better job of embracing, I think, those social and emotional needs of students, sometimes those unmet needs of students, and to begin to help students develop skills of self-regulation. We began to worry more about their self-esteem and understanding that those things were drivers, not only for their health, but they were, and their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their self-worth, but also they are drivers with regard to their achievement. What we found is that schools, of course, did that with varying capacity and competency. And what you find now, as we move from 2020 into 2021, and we see the complexity of the barriers that not only our students, but our communities are facing, we realize that there's a greater need for collaboration. I think there's been no better maybe demonstration of that than what we faced in COVID, and the fact that we must combine public health and education together to strengthen communities, but also to affect the overall health of communities. So what you see now is that schools are embracing what we consider this wave 3, which is whole child development, and is inclusive of wraparound services, and is encouraging schools and communities to begin to collaborate more comprehensively and to break down those silos between the schools. What we know, and anyone who works with young people knows today, is that we are facing crisis on a variety of fronts. Even before COVID-19 hit, our communities across our nation were facing an epidemic of substance use. We've seen anxiety and mental health crises peak. We are now seeing some joblessness and homelessness peak. What we know is that for individuals to fight through those barriers, they have to have some social and emotional assets that are assigned really under that umbrella of hope and of resilience. And what we know is that children, teens, and even families have these protective factors that exist in a healthy community. This is based on international research, which is why you'll see the word neighborhood is spelled kind of funny in this slide. But if you look at international research on protective factors, what you see is, what do children need to grow up healthy, well connected, and successful? And what you see here on this slide is the protective factors that you hope exist with equity in all communities. What we know is that the reality is that those things do not. And so when we look to extension services, when we look to mental health, when we look to community providers, we're hoping to lean into these protective barriers and to these protective factors, and to strengthen them so that they can mitigate the barriers that students and families are facing. What you see here: connection to non-parental adults, awareness and access to local health services, overall neighborhood safety, closeness of caring friends. These are things that I hope that you can discover as you look to your why within your organization. I believe that these are things that your organizations may be working very hard to provide for the young people and the families in your community. What I want to do to make the presentation a little bit interactive today is, if you have a pencil or paper that you can access, I'd like you to complete this sentence for me. I want our graduates to be. Now, when I'm working with school systems, graduate, I mean, is a student graduating from 12th grade, maybe going into the college or the career force. If you're an agency or an organization, you could change that word to participants. But at the completion of your program, what is it that you want your graduates, participants to be? As you think about young people going to that next phase, you think about them being employers, employees, you think about them being neighbors, caretakers, service providers. I want you to think for just a moment and maybe think of 7 to 10 adjectives that would describe those essential skills, life skills, that you want your participants to achieve. I'm going to give you about a minute to do that. Take about 20 more seconds. As you look at the list that you've created, 6, 7, 10 words, I'd like you to prioritize that list. And if you could only keep 3, as you think of preparing your participants, your clients, your students for life success, if you could only instill 3 assets in them going forward to live a full life, what would those 3 assets be? I'd like you to circle those 3 assets. If you look at the Wordle that should have just appeared on your screen, this is actually a process that we do when we go in and work with communities for their strategic planning. We ask them, what are the skills, though, as assets that they want their young adults to have as the tools in their toolkit as they go forward into life? What you see here are words that are very typical of what we hear: problem solver, hopeful, resilient, connected, loved, adaptive, law-abiding, empathetic, motivated, knowledgeable, prepared, good citizens. What we find is that when you ask communities to really focus on the essential elements of the young people we're wanting to collaboratively create, what we hear is the who they're going to become. I think sometimes we spend so much time focused on what job we're preparing a student for. I understand that. I want students to be future focused. I want them to have a purpose. I want them to have aspiration and dream of what they want to be. I just think that when you look at the success of a human being, it isn't so much tied in what job they do as in who they are. And I think if we look at individuals in recovery, we look at people trying to start over, we talk about reintegrating people who have come out of prison back into communities, what has suffered is the who of who they are. So whether you're working with children or you're working with adults, it would be my contention that we need to spend more time focusing on who, and that's how we need to collaborate going forward to strengthen our communities. When you start working to create these collaborative partnerships, the groundbreaking work, the foundational work, it all begins with building relational trust across your communities. We, of course, work a great deal with schools. So you see school there in our green puzzle, but that could just as easily be 4-H, or it could just as easily be a recovery community organization, or it could just as easily be someone who's working with another form of community services like mental health. But what you have is your agency, you have schools, you have your young people, you have families, and you have members of your community. It takes time to build that relational trust between the leaders of those organizations, but that's really the heavy lifting and the foundational work that can't be rushed in the work that we do. So it's spending a lot of time together and collaborating, sharing data, and telling your truths about what's going on in your community. We do think, of course, and acknowledge that the mindset of the leaders to do this work is incredibly important. So what we believe is that you're looking for partners, you're looking for collaborative leaders when you're trying to decide who it is that your organization should most partner with. You're thinking, first of all, who works with a shared clientele, and what's the leadership of that organization like, and what complementary services can they bring my clients, my residents, my students, okay, my participants. So you're looking at leaders who have these assets. In general, they have to be courageous. Leaders, to begin this work, we have to uncover some of the truths that are going on in our community to build that relational trust. And to do those, we have to admit those things. So Linda and I usually talk about 4 tenets of the leaders for wraparound services or for holistic services in communities. And we say these leaders must have the courage to seek the truth. They must have the courage to speak the truth. They must have the courage to stretch the capacity of their agency beyond those siloed lanes that they're in, and have the vision to see innovative partnerships as a way to achieve what they really want to achieve. And they're doing all this for the ability to serve others. So seek the truth, speak this truth, stretch yourself, and serve others. Those are the kind of leaders that you're looking for. And these are actually the assets that we believe those leaders oftentimes have who are most successful. As a part of building that relational trust, we believe that the foundational work is in gathering voice. For us, we specialize in gathering the voice of young people, but many of the processes we use are just as applicable to adults or to family members. But we believe in gathering voice, you are able to strengthen relationships. You strengthen relationships by talking about some of those barriers to health and learning. You destigmatize the discussion about mental health or immigration or family changes or substance use. You normalize your responses to those. You normalize the seeking of help and the admission that those things are what are going on in your families. You normalize the ability to ask for help. And you check yourself when it comes to that stereotyping or judging. It's all about strengthening those relationships for the purpose of cultivating that hope. But that center part is the work, and the very heavy work of building that relational trust. Otherwise, you begin to provide these services, or you even develop a wraparound, one-stop shop, a hub of services. And just because you're providing the services does not mean that your community will know about it or that they will avail themselves of the services. So during this gathering of voice, you're actually strengthening those relationships to the point that you can become navigators and connectors for your participants or your families and students. This is a slide that you would see if you were to buy our book that you look at, that we believe these are the 7 steps of this improvement wheel that we're talking about, that you have to listen first. You're listening first to identify needs and prioritize needs. You're getting quantitative as well as qualitative data to inform your work, to inform your grants. You're identifying resources, and then you're going about creating the organizational structure of what those partnerships are going to look like, where services are going to be provided. And then the WIG, the wildly important goal, is obviously to connect your students, your family members, or your community members with those services. So these are kind of the 7 steps that you would go through to developing the collaboration that you need within your community to really achieve equity. In our book, we go into 5 processes for gathering student voice. Conversation circles, graduation stories is something you do with 5th graders, 8th graders, and seniors. Off-track interviews, again, is something that's done with students who are beginning to fall behind with regard to the culminating barriers in their lives, and how you begin to uncover what those things really are, and begin to look towards the collaboration of partnerships to step in and create a safety net for those students, a collaboration or association of care of agencies. There's a needs assessment that can be done either with students or with adults, and then also processes for how to run focus groups on identified barriers to really uncover the programming and the services that the young people or the adults in your community need. What we find when we go in and interview students across the country and communities, I'm defensive of school systems. It's 30 years as a teacher and a principal. I found that oftentimes public schools were described as failing our children or failing our students. I'm defensive about that. What I believe is that as communities, we are failing our young people. And I believe what we find when we begin to ask students is, we ask them, what are those things that are getting in the way of your learning? I will tell you that after interviewing literally tens of thousands of students, I've never had one student say their school is the reason that they're failing. And I'm not saying that all schools are delivering the high quality services they should. I'm just saying that when you ask a student, what are your greatest barriers to learning or health or success in the future? This is what they say. They say mobility. They say family changes. That could be pregnancy, incarceration, divorce, bankruptcy. They talk about being homeless. They talk about having to work jobs, take care of their siblings, lacking transportation. They talk about addiction, whether that's alcohol, substance use, porn, drugs. They talk about immigration. They talk about mental, emotional, social, physical health, and they talk about trauma, those adverse childhood experiences that have hijacked their focus or their ability to focus and their ability to be hopeful going forward if they're not connected with services and if they're not connected with opportunity. What Linda and I found in our work is that 2 of these are particularly damning when combined with the other 3. And this is where your work as social agencies and organizations that work with young people and families really can be, the power of what you do can be harnessed. We find that transiency, mobility, and we find that poverty, when those 2 things alone or combined are also combined with family changes, addiction, immigration, health, or trauma, what we find is that that's child is much more likely to succumb to the barriers of their life, to the wounds, to the unmet needs. What we find is that they have limited access to services, limited access to opportunity. So that transiency and poverty, it affects that equity, the connections that that family has, not only to extended families sometimes, but to actual community services and agencies. What I believe is that regardless of the organization you work with, whether it is violence against women, or it is public health, or it is substance use, or it is mental health, or it is ACT services, you are dealing with people that are dealing with these barriers in their lives, and you have to deepen your capacity to know how to respond with best practices and processes. I would like to recommend a book to you. This is a book that talks about those clusters of barriers, but it also talks about a clustering of your response. When they talk about how do we make students resilient, remember you saw that in some big bold lettering in that Wordle. We all want our children to be hopeful and to be resilient. We know that they're going to face, push through those things that impact them and come back from something difficult. And what we believe is that those seeds are by building in young people optimism, self-worth, self-regulation, belonging, and a sense of purpose. This literally is one of my favorite resources for anyone who works with young people or anyone who works with families. We believe that the Building a Culture of Hope is just a must read. So if you are interested in ordering a resource, this is one that I would recommend. Oops, sorry. This is the wraparound model, the Synergy Project model that we talk about. We believe that we must connect students equitably with services and opportunity in these areas: health and wellness, basic needs, community services, academic opportunity, college and career transition, and safety and justice. A young person or a family who is well connected in all of these areas can navigate the different barriers that they will have, that believe will have impact in their lives. You see something a little tiny written in there called U-Science. That's just a wonderful resource that you can connect with over the internet that allows young people and adults to take an asset aptitude mining assessment. It costs about $29, and it's amazing in what it does to help develop that self-esteem and self-worth, but also that sense of purpose in human beings, and help them develop a positive asset-minded language in describing themselves. So that's something I encourage you to research after our presentation today. But when we talk about resource mapping, this is what we're talking about doing. And I know that some of the work of the 4-H agents in Georgia and maybe across the nation has been to go in and do some resource mapping in their communities. What we do is take the petals, those 6 petals from that wraparound flower, and we just begin to write. After we've identified and prioritized needs, we begin to identify those resources, those agencies and organizations that are in communities that can lean in and provide complementary services. What we know as a school system, or what you may know within your agency, whatever is the particular service of your agency, when you begin thinking about those barriers, transiency, poverty, immigration, addiction, family changes, trauma, you start looking at those things, you do not have the capacity, no matter what organization you are, to holistically meet or provide for those needs. You can't. And so it's only through collaborating with your co-partners within your community that you can begin to do that. So once you've mined that voice, then sitting down and looking at really doing some resource mapping and asset mapping in your community is important. It's important that you know who's out there, if for no other reason than to be a connector or a navigator. If you're particularly interested in partnering in schools, then sharing a resource map like this with a principal or even a superintendent who may be new to their job or new to the area is an important way that you can build your credibility with that potential educational partner. So sitting down with other people in the community, sharing your data, sharing your voice, and beginning to collaboratively build this asset map or resource map is a really important step to actually achieving wraparound services. When you're looking at a partner, okay, that recommended partner that works with the same clientele, okay, but maybe provides different services. I will tell you as a principal, there were times that I had to engage intensively with a student or a family because of either a crisis in their life or a barrier that they were facing. And I often found that other agencies were already working with that family, but we're all working in our own silos, right? We're not working together with some kind of collective case management model. So what you got to begin to do is, what is that mission that your agency has, and who's another agency in the community, not that's achieving this, is necessarily trying to achieve the same mission in the same way, but they are looking at holistically supporting young people and families. And what you're looking for is someone who works with your same clientele, but they provide a different type of service, one that might complement what you're trying to do. So these are the steps that you have to go through when you're looking at building that partnership: listening first, asking another agency how you might help them achieve their mission with more people in the community with greater effectiveness. You'll see down here, leveraging the partner's expertise, defining goals and measurables. One of the documents that the University of Georgia will push out after this presentation is actually just a 2-page partnership planning guide. That's something that's in our book, but we want to provide that as a handout of just, if you're going in to have a partnership meeting, what is that information that you need to gather from that other agency to deepen your ability to be successful and having a really deep, consistent, pervasive, useful, effective partnership, rather than just some kind of superficial partnership signing ceremony. Like, what does it really look like beyond hanging up banners or sharing logos? This is more about checking your logos at the door, but actually working together and celebrating what you're able to achieve together. It's very useful when it comes to writing grants, to combine the information from this partnership planning guide as well as that voice, to help have some collaborative funding, some collaborative staff. This helps you get to the point that when you are sharing staff, funding, and space, you actually can do that effectively, efficiently, but maybe get past some of what might be some resistance to change. Most people are interested in achieving new things until it means that they have to change something about the way they do something. And so it's important to have some of those conversations up front. So together, we believe that if we're serious about our goal of creating young people and young adults in our community that are all these things, that are hopeful, that are motivated, that are employable, and stay employed, that they know how to advocate for others, that they're adaptive, that we have to make use of all that's in our community. The purpose behind Whole Child and the purpose behind wraparound services and the processes that we recommend is because you want to achieve four things. You want to break down silos and create an association of care, because no agency can really do it alone. Families are not typically facing one barrier, they're facing a cluster of barriers, and they need a cluster of responses, expertise, and resources. You want to move from those random acts of good intention in your community to something that's actually synergistic and systemic and accountable. You want to go from being externally referring at all times to actually to the point, some point, that those services are actually so highly collaborative that they can feel embedded. What we do when we go into communities is actually create this one-stop shop, this wraparound services center, where you have representatives of all different agencies in one building. So families can have that local interagency planning team kind of experience in a way that's more effective, and there's actually a collective system of case management and care. But also, you're going from a fear of liability to what we consider a smart trust. Sometimes we don't partner because there's a fear of liability. If we partner, if they know too much, if we share our data, there are ways to do that in ways that actually minimize your liability, because you're bringing in the expertise people who actually work in that field. They're not becoming your employers, they're just collaborative partners. They bring their own insurance, their own expertise, their own resources. You just work together. And so it's how do you achieve those partnerships with a level of smart trust in communities? And that's really the only way we believe that communities are going to be able to achieve equity in action. One of the phrases that Linda and I talk about sometimes is agencies, organizations, school systems, healthcare providers. We kind of have created these cages of our own design. So what we believe is so hopeful and is so effective about wraparound services, and we're breaking down those cages of our own design to really achieve equity of access and equity of opportunity for all. So we want you to draw your attention to the fact that you have a Q&A box. And in your Q&A box, you can type in some questions and answers, and we're going to stay in line with you and try to answer as many of those questions as we can. And just a closing slide here, this is our website, thesynergyproject.com. We're also active on Twitter, and then this is my email address and Linda's email address here. If you ever need to contact us, please feel free to do so. And if you're interested in learning more about the processes we've talked to do today, then we recommend that you go to Solution Tree and order the resource. I know actually, I think the university's got some they're going to give away as door prizes today, but we encourage you to do that. We encourage you to reach out to us through our website or even directly by email.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lee. That was a great overview. I know that we all learned a lot, and this definitely helped me understand more about wraparound services and how our agency and partners can really do more to help facilitate student success as a whole. So if the panelists will all turn their cameras back on and their mics back on, we do have some questions coming in. And the first one is from Tim Johnson. Tim writes, in wraparound whole child services, you've described the Communities and Schools site coordinator model, currently in about 30 Georgia communities. vis-a-vis comprehensive collaborative strategic planning. That's the family connection model, which is in every county in Georgia. 4-H and Extension are often partners in both currently. As you roll this out, how are you proposing to partner with and not duplicate this work that is already in place? Lee, I think I'm going to punch that to you.
Okay. All right. So in my experience, which was, whoops, so sorry, turning off my timer here. So in my community, which was I was 30 years as a teacher and principal, we did have a communities and schools representative that worked within our school. What we found was that model was typically one person in each school, typically the high school, that had a caseload of 100 kids, but they also did some whole school programming with students. But that person then was responsible for trying to connect those students and families with agencies and services, and it might be to set up those one-on-one meetings. What's different about a fully implementable wraparound model, different than most of what I've seen in Georgia, other than the ones we've worked with in Gainesville and Richmond and Columbia, is actually that you pull agency representatives, including communities and schools, and they actually have an office within a school building or within a centralized site within the community, and you have one representative from each one of those agencies. 4-H might be one, communities and schools might be one, the homeless shelter might be one, a domestic violence center might be one, probation. So you bring all those agencies, one representative from each together, and then you do have a wraparound coordinator that helps individual families connect with those services. So it's actually a model of co-location of the agencies and a coordination of that co-location of the agencies, rather than one person being the site coordinator that works just with high school students. You might be working with the families, that kind of thing. I'm not sure if that, and you're certainly welcome.
Lee, I would add that if a communities and schools has a partnership with a school in a wraparound center, then that job is much easier, because those partners that they're referring and trying to connect families to are right there. And so it really does help them become more effective at being that school, embedded school person.
And you're right, that communities and schools person is vital really to the success of the program. In most of the centers that we've created, I think we have 9 different centers in Georgia that we've created. We always recommend that they reach out to their United Way Vistas, they reach out to their communities and schools folks, and they become a part of the center. In most of our examples, the director of student services or the director of family services is usually a school system paid full-time employee. They typically have the experience of having been an administrator within the school. And they have the ability then to coordinate the services and be the face of the center in a greater way out in the community.
Great. Thank you, ladies. Got a couple more questions. Lydia asked, are there any basic materials we can order in quantities for students?
Yeah, sure. What we find, if you're talking about basic materials, what we find depending on the community is not only in our centers, we usually have a food pantry that's usually provided either by local churches, Atlanta Community Food Bank for us, or different agencies. So we usually provide food, we provide clothing, we assist the school systems in setting up washers and dryers. It costs a lot of money to be poor. So families that don't have—
I'm going to elaborate on that. I think that this question probably refers more to your guide and the templates that you guys have. So maybe if you could explain more of the resources that are put into place to really gather that student voice.
Markers, flip charts, and ears.
Yeah, let me go.
You can show that graphic if you want. While you're pulling that up,
yeah, let me show you.
While Lee's pulling that up, I'm gonna read the next question just so y'all can be thinking about it. But Willie Davis wants to know, how can we set up a partnership for a school?
All right, so let's look at this first. These are just 4 questions that we ask students when we go in. What types of academic and college and career services? What types of behavioral and life skills are needed by students? What types of partnerships or clinical services do we believe students are needed, and what types of family services and supports are needed by your school families? These will be included in the PowerPoint when UGA uploads it. I don't expect you to be able to read it this fast, but these are actually artifacts from a recent high school when we went in and asked these 4 questions. This becomes then the basis of the student voice needs survey that we do in schools that allows you to get quantitative as well as qualitative. With regard to basic needs, like you were talking about, we always see, you know, school supplies, we see basic feminine care items, we see basic hygiene items become things that students talk about, but also different parent education and family issues. But so as far as the processes and things that are in our book, we have those 5 voice processes, but then we also have tools for all the different steps of that synergy cycle wheel. If you're interested in learning more about that before you invest in purchasing the book, you can go to Solution Tree's website, which is just solutiontree.com, and look at the table of contents in the book. But you can also see a study guide that's provided, and you can see the reproducibles that are provided. And even do kind of an overview of the book. It might be something that you want to do before you think the book costs about $40. But you can see all these reproducible tools and processes that are, I think, applicable to a variety of community partnerships or agencies.
Thank you, Lee. And the next question is from Willie. How can we set up a partnership for a school?
By we, I'm thinking it's a county extension service agency. I don't know if
it's probably a school.
Yeah, it's probably a school that's asking that.
Yeah, I don't recognize the name.
Okay, so if you're an agency seeking partnership with communities, I mean, what I would do is set up meetings either with the principal or the superintendent and find out their interest in launching wraparound services, or to what capacity they're already doing that. And then and you could even look at that partnership planning guide as a way to try to figure out what that shared mission is. What kind of data do you have to provide? What kind of data would you need from them to be more effective? But starting that initial conversation, I think, is important. And following those voice processes, possibly with whoever your clientele is, to gather what they say are their needs and what they say are their barriers, and then meeting with that educational leader to see where there's overlap, and begin to just develop that conversation that way. I do think it's important to have some knowledge of the ASCD and CDC's model, the WISC model, which is how can health and education intersect more effectively. We have a whole chapter of that in our book that would just be good background for knowledge for someone who's not already working in a school system, as well as how school system funding works for collaborative grants. But I think the first processes are always to listen and gather voice, and then to begin to have those initial partnership identification meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, so Willie just clarified that he's a charter high school in Fulton County and a credit recovery school.
Okay.
Well, if you were in Fulton County, Willie, one of the things I would recommend you do is set up time to go to Banneker High School. Absolutely. In South Fulton. It's in Union City. Banneker High School actually has a fully implemented wraparound center. The director there is named Igola Richardson. And if you want to email me, I could help connect the two of you, but I would recommend that you go and see Igola. She is a tremendous resource within Fulton County, and one of the centers that we worked with to create, but she's doing amazing things there.
And I do think in Fulton County, they have some headquarter resources, you know, some central office resources to help you in those partnerships too.
Partnership development.
Yeah, there's some infrastructure already in place there in Fulton for that.
Yeah. I thought it would be interesting if you could explain a couple of the systems and schools that you work with. I know you've done a lot of work with Gainesville City Schools and Cobb Marietta.
Yeah, if they're interested in actually touring some centers, yes, then some of the high schools that we know that have implemented deeper degrees of wraparound services would be Decatur High School, Marietta High School. Meriwether County is opening 2 centers in their high schools in the coming school year. So we're in that process of developing those centers now with them. Gainesville City Schools, their center is called The Hub. In my opinion, it is the exemplar in the state of Georgia right now, particularly with their partnership between the school system and the hospital system there. But the director's name is Tanya Sanders, and you can call Gainesville City Schools, the hub, to schedule a tour. Banneker High School in Fulton County. We also have a center in Peoria, Illinois, there are other states that are doing really deep work with wraparound. Kentucky is, I know some of the schools in Chicago are trying to. So I think there are different hubs in different parts around the country. If people want to email me, I can do my best to connect them with some of their areas. But in Georgia, we do have 9 that are open. Polk County also is doing some good work with implementing mental health services within their schools.
You've got a few more questions we want to make sure we get to. Sandra wants to know what we can do to include non-English speaking residents.
Well, first of all, you have to gather their voice, which means you may need a translator to help you do that. I also find it's advantageous to gather voice through kids who are now maybe 9th, 10th, 11th grade, 12th graders who maybe were in the English language learners program when they were elementary students, and they may be first generation students in our country. They're quite articulate and informed about the barriers they faced in entering American schools and being successful in American schools. When you gain the trust of the kids, it's easier to gain the trust of the families. So I often do conversation circles and focus groups with students that have limited English. I just always have a translator in there with me to connect those things. And I usually meet with the kids through the school systems before I meet with their families. We have family permission, of course, but I usually meet with the kids before I meet with the adults. But you're right, building that relational trust, it comes with meeting their needs. I mean, when we opened our food pantry and our laundry services and our hygiene and basic needs services and our school supplies, my county, we had about 40% of our students were Hispanic. And what we found is that the organic conversations that grew when we were meeting those basic needs are what built that relational trust in that community, that they knew they could come and talk to us. Not only that we would have translators provided, but we had stuff that they were in need of.
And also provided parent education for English classes. I don't think you mentioned that. That was another partnership that was really good at reaching out to that community.
Awesome. A few more questions. We've got one from Winnie. Did I hear you say that there is a collaboration already in Richmond County?
Yes, you'd want to contact Natalie Bracey, who is in Richmond County Schools, and they have opened 2 wraparound centers and 2 schools there in Richmond County, but they serve students from around Richmond County. But if you wanted to email me, I'll be happy to share Natalie's email with you. Also, Rachel Sarapek, which is in Columbia County. That is there. They're also pushing in wraparound services into their 5 high schools there.
And we have a question from Deborah. I believe Deborah is an extension professional down in Southwest Georgia. She wants to know, how can we find out if our schools have a wraparound program?
Well, there are 2 ways you can do it. First, you can contact your RESA. Every RESA in Georgia was provided through a state grant through the DOE, a wraparound services coordinator person that would go in and help school systems and community agencies who are interested in partnering. So your local RESA, which all the school systems belong to the different RESAs. You can talk to RESA directors to find out who the wraparound specialist is. Again, if you want to contact us, I can help you kind of coordinate and connect with that person. But also then it's just to look on, I was about to say look on their websites. I actually don't recommend looking on their websites. It can just take too much time. I just pick up the phone and call and find out if the school systems are doing anything with wraparound services, if they have any type of provider hub, or send an email to the principal on behalf of your agency and ask. Some school systems are doing this work deeply. Some are just beginning. We had a lot of momentum, like a lot of people did before COVID. Now school systems are just in perpetual whitewater trying to survive that. But I think you'll find that there are a lot of principals who are interested in learning more, and there are a lot of principals who are taking those baby steps to actually launch this kind of wraparound holistic service kind of support for their students and families. But honestly, after watching this webinar and getting the resource, you may know as much about it as they do. There's just a varying degree of capacity.
Great. A couple more questions. We have one from Penny. I heard Ms. Lee mention Vista. How are you connected with them?
So the Richmond County Wraparound Services Center use Vistas inside their schools. And those people are working inside the schools to be connectors and navigators, so that if a family or student members present as having certain needs, then they help connect those students and families to those wraparound services that the school system has up and implemented. Richmond County wrote a grant, and part of the money provided for the Vistas came from United Way, I believe, and part of it came from the school system. So I think at last count, they had 5 Vistas working within their school district.
I'm not sure if everyone on here knows what a Vista is. And if you don't, I'm gonna bat that to Mandy, because 4-H does a lot of work with Vistas.
Okay, good. I thought if you asked
So
me,
let's let Mandy take that one, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm wishing that my colleagues Carrie Hobson, Jason Eastep, and Jennifer Cantwell were on with us right now, but VISTA stands for Volunteers in Service to America. We have quite a few that serve in roles in counties to help further our reach.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. It's a great program to look at for students who have just graduated high school or are just out of college and kind of not really sure, what path forward they want. I'm our employee recruitment coordinator for Extension, and we often get applicants from very qualified folks that we just don't have positions for. And I always encourage them to look at the VISTA program, because there's generally placements all over the state in different capacities with nonprofits and state agencies. So definitely something worth looking at. Winnie wants your email so you can find out Natalie's address. I think Lee's email is right there on the screen, lee@thecentergproject.com. We also will post that if she's okay with that. And Lauren asks, what are your best words of wisdom for classroom teachers who are working towards equity of all student voices, but those difficult conversations in rural areas are met with administration resistance? Good question.
Yeah, okay. I will tell you, I think the greatest barrier to achieving the deep level of consistent and pervasive practice that we're talking about is actually the school system in many cases. It can be the mindset of the leadership. It could be just the school system being overwhelmed and overtaxed and not knowing how to reach outside their own lane. What I typically find is that the most impactful way to change the hearts and minds and to mobilize a community or your school leaders is to gather the student voice. What you find is that the actual words of kids have a way of moving the hearts and the minds, and they have a way of mobilizing people to care and to take action. So I would actually recommend using the student voice processes, even within your own classroom, or hopefully getting your counselor or your social worker on board to do some conversation circles and some focus groups, or within your agency, doing some focus groups and conversation circles and surveys with your kids, and then having that qualitative and quantitative data on hand. Well, when Linda and I go in and interview, and you see you see 4 charts there earlier, over about 30 different charts that we probably do. We actually create those charts and hold faculty meetings, and we invite the leadership and the board members and the teachers to do carousel walks and actually engage with the language of kids and what kids are saying. I meet very little resistance after we do that.
Great, thank you, Lee. Couple of other things wanted to mention. Mandy wanted me to just reiterate that we are really introducing and integrating wraparound as a terminology that we include in our partnerships and training our own faculty and staff. So it's something that we really are trying to position ourselves to be knowledgeable about and a good resource for helping people get connected with that concept. So I think this is a great initial step to help us move further down that path. So we really appreciate y'all's time and your expertise. It's exciting to see the work that you are doing, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about your work down the road. So I think we got all of the questions. I may have seen a question about Meriwether County, but I think Linda answered that. So with that, we will stay online for just a couple more minutes, probably about 5 more minutes, just informally. You guys are welcome to chat us. And we appreciate y'all's interest and time. And this recording will be posted to YouTube probably sometime next week, along with the slides and other resources that Lee mentioned. We'll put that out on the webinar website. And I might potentially send it out via email, but we'll cross that bridge next week. So if you have a specific need, you can email me or Lee, and we'll make sure that we get you guys connected. All right. Well, I'm going to mute myself for now, and we can just hang out for a few minutes with the panelists and chat. Thank you guys. You've been a great audience, great questions, and I'll try to figure out how we're going to decide who gets the couple of wraparound guides that that we wanted to offer up as an incentive for the great conversation today.